Well, good afternoon and welcome back from the break, everyone. I'm pleased to announce the next lecture. We're going to hear about SIP, Session Initiation Protocol Security, from Jan Seedorf from the University of Hamburg. And we all are used to treating telephone protocols as inherently secure. Now, that's probably not true, otherwise he wouldn't be standing here and giving us this lecture. And he's going to guide us through a little bit of history of SIP and, well, future extensions and what can be done there and what actually is not done security-wise. Jan, you have it. Enjoy.
Thank you for the introduction. Is my microphone on? Can you hear me from this? Yeah? Okay. Thanks for the introduction. My name is Jan Seedorf. I work at the University of Hamburg in the Security and Distributed Systems group. And what I will talk about today is ZIP security, and I subtitled the talk Status Quo and Future Issues. Because what I will talk about is what's going on today, but also have an outlook on some future networks and what the problems will be there. So what's my intention today? First of all, I want to show you some differences between the public switch telephone network that we use today and ZIP-based voice over IP. And I hope that during this talk you will realize that these differences really affect security for ZIP. So this is what I will start with. Then I want to give you an overview of current work that's going on in ZIP security, and hopefully you get an insight on what's going on. And unfortunately I cannot show you everything, but I've chosen some important areas of work that I will talk about. And finally, I will give you an outlook on security issues in future, namely peer-to-peer ZIP networks. This is not even being standardized yet, but this is has been proposed by some researchers, and I've looked into the security implications of such an approach. So, here's my agenda. First of all, I give you a short overview over voice over IP and how signaling with ZIP is really done. Then, like I said, we'll talk about differences to the public switch telephone network. Then I'll show you some current research problems and what's been done there to solve these problems. Talk about security in peer-to-peer ZIP networks. And finally, I will conclude. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with voice over IP and ZIP, I'll give you a short introduction. First of all, what is voice over IP? Quite often you find this definition here, the transmission of digitized voice over an IP-based network. Now, if you think about this, you might say, well, if I send an MP3 file via email to a friend of mine, this is voice over IP. Well, according to this definition, yes. So we might want to add the real-time transmission. And what we usually have with voice over IP, and that's quite important, is the separation of signaling and media transfer. And during the next couple of slides, I show you what this means and how this is being done. And what's happening with voice over IP is that during the last couple of years, it's really matured. ZIP has emerged as a widely used standard. There are lots of ZIP providers out there. In Germany, there are plenty. At least I know that, and in the US. And there are plenty of ZIP phones. You can buy them. You can buy ZIP adapters and everything. And I'd like to ask the audience, who's using voice over IP? Okay, that's about more than half. Who's using Skype of those? Well, not so many. That's good, because I won't be talking about Skype today. Who's using ZIP? Okay, that's why you're in this talk, probably, to find out if it's secure what you're using. Well, that's good. So, what is ZIP? It stands for Session Initiation Protocol. It's a protocol standardized by the IETF. And basically what it is, it's an application layer signaling protocol for multimedia sessions. Now, as you can tell, this means this is not only for voice over IP. You can use it for chatting, for presence services, for online gaming, for all kinds of things, for video conferencing. But of course, it's also used for voice over IP. And after the session has been set up, the media transfer then is done with the real-time transfer protocol, usually. So here's a couple of things that ZIP supports. It's not really important for ZIP security here today. So let's go right into an example. Well, I have a little bit of trouble here because what you usually should see here are domains. This is a domain here, and here's also a domain. But this is the first Beamer I've had that doesn't show these domain domains here, but that's not a problem. So how does zip work? Like I've said, we have a domain here. This is Alice's domain, and this is Bob's domain. And then we have a DNS server here somewhere on the internet. Now, excuse me, if Alice and Bob want to communicate, what they first need is they need a zip URI. And zip communication is based on the URI, which you can see here. Alice has the URI alice@atlanta.com, and Bob has a URI like bob@biloxi.com. This is pretty similar to an email address. So for now, consider this just like an email address. Now, the zip then is an ASCII-based text protocol, so it really is just text messages that are being sent from A to B, and this is requests and responses, just like you have in HTTP. So if Bob wants to receive messages, first of all, he has to register his zip URI. So he sends a register message to his local registrar, which then stores the binding of his zip URI and his current IP address at a location service. Now then, if Alice wants to call Bob, she sends an invite message to her local zip proxy, who then needs to do a DNS lookup to find out under what IP address he can reach the zip proxy in Bob's domain. So then he can forward the message to Bob's proxy, who has to look up at the location service where Bob can actually be reached right now, his current IP address, and then forward the message to Bob's device. Now at this point, Bob knows Alice's zip URI, but also, of course, her IP address, because it's included in the message. So then Bob can directly contact Alice, set up media parameters and everything, and start the session, and then eventually initiate the RTP real-time stream, so the actual voice communication. So this is basically how it works, and here you can actually see why security-wise we might want to look at zip, because zip starts the session, so any kind of authentication or encryption or anything we can already arrange in the zip session initiation, and then use it further for the protection of the real-time stream. Okay, some important differences between the public switch telephone network and the session initiation protocol I want to tell you about. First of all, if you look at signaling, in the public switch telephone network, most of the time I call this PSTN, we have signaling in a closed network. It's called SS7, you probably never heard of it. It's just there, it's not open, you cannot access it, but it works fine. Now with ZIP, we have signaling in an open network, and even worse, we have signaling in a highly insecure network. It's called the internet, and we all know that this is not a secure network. So we see that this causes some problems. Second, if you look at terminals, if you think of traditional telephones, like you all know, these are real simple devices. They don't offer much functionality. Now with ZIP, the network intelligence moves kind of to the terminals. So now in the phones, these are complex devices. They have a TCP/IP stack. They have ZIP functionality. They maybe have DNS support. They have all kinds of things. So they're kind of complicated. And of course, this leads to vulnerabilities. And there are already plenty of vulnerabilities in ZIP implementations. So this is another problem that we face. Another really important difference is if you look at mobility, in the PSTN you have no mobility at all. You just have a plug on the wall and you can plug in your phone and that's fine. Now with ZIP you just need access to the internet, and this can be anywhere on the planet, and then you can use the same identity. So we have mobility, and this leads us directly to our next point, authentication. Because we have no mobility in the PSTN, users really get authenticated by plugging the wire in the wall. Now with ZIP, because we have mobility on the IP layer, we need some additional authentication on the application layer. And during this talk, I hope you will understand how this works and what the problems here really are. Now if you think about these last 2 points closer, you might say, well, the PSTN doesn't have mobility, so we don't need much authentication. That's true. But there is a phone network that we all use and know, maybe love, I don't know, that has these problems with mobility and authentication. And this is, of course, GSM. Who has a GSM phone? Right. I guess it's everybody. Mine is there. And GSM, of course, has the same problems. You have mobility, so you need authentication. So what does GSM do? So if we think about this for a minute, first of all, GSM uses smart cards. It's really important. You all know that you have a SIM card in your phone, that this is a highly secured crypto processor and everything. Secondly, if you think of GSM, there's only a limited number of providers. And Well, the security model at least is that they trust each other. If they really do, I don't know. In Germany, for example, we have four providers. And this is not the case with voice over IP. So for now, voice over IP devices, they don't use smart cards. And of course, we have plenty of providers, and everybody can actually install its ZIP proxy. So it's quite different. So we might need something else. Now, the key point here is that these differences between the PSTN that I've just shown you and ZIP have significant consequences for security. And if you think back during the next slides I will present you, each of the problems I will present you basically come from these differences. So the problems really are not a surprise if you think about it. So let's look at some current research problems. What's going on? First of all, ZIP is a protocol actually where security has been considered from the start, which is pretty good. The standard RFC 3261 has already some parts about security, and in there it's specified how ZIP can be used with S-MIME, with digit authentication, and with TLS and IPsec. And actually, ZIP is pretty often used with TLS together. However, if you think about this, if two users want to communicate for all these security mechanisms, they either need a pre-called trust relationship, which they might have, but if they don't have it, they need something like a PKI. They need certificates from their other partners. So for worldwide internet telephony, what we really need for these mechanisms is something like a universal trust infrastructure with one root that everybody trusts, and that's compatible for all users. Now, as you all know, we don't have this right now. There are plenty of problems with public key infrastructures. So all these protocols, or security mechanisms rather, they might work in a company, but they probably don't work worldwide, or at least not right now. So we need some additional mechanisms. So these are the problems I've chosen that I will discuss today. Of course, this list is not complete. I mean, there's plenty of other work going on. This is just what I picked during the time I have to show you. And these are some important areas of work, at least from my point of view. So first, authentication. I've already said this is a big problem. And here again, I guess this is not new now. The problem really is that ZIP users are mobile, so they change their location, meaning their IP address. And thus, we cannot use the IP address to authenticate users. And as long as we don't have a worldwide PKI, we might need something else to authenticate users. Now, what can we do? First approach, or an interesting approach, is ZRTP, which has been developed by Phil Zimmermann, the inventor of PGP. It really doesn't work on ZIP, but I included it here because it really is an alternative to authentication with ZIP. So ZRTP really, what it really offers is authentication of a known communication partner without a trust infrastructure. And how this can be done, I'll show you on the next couple of slides. But what it really is a Diffie-Hellman key exchange that is secure against man-in-the-middle attacks. And I will show you how this works. Now, this slide actually I took from one of our teaching exercises at the university that we do, because who knows what a Diffie-Hellman key exchange is? Oh, well, that's plenty. I didn't expect this. But Diffie-Hellman key exchange basically always is susceptible to a man-in-the-middle attack. And how this works you can see here. If A wants to set up a Diffie-Hellman key exchange with B, A cannot be sure that there's a man in the middle who actually establishes a different key with B, and then just acts as a man in the middle and passes on messages. So this is a problem we have with Diffie-Hellman key exchanges. Now, how does this relate to ZRTP? Here again we have our picture, and we have Alicia and Beyoncé who want to communicate. And for now, let's forget about the ZIP session. Let's assume they have established a session, but they have not authenticated each other. So we focus here on the RTP stream. But of course, they have established a session and set up an RTP stream. Now,